Welcome to the programme. We begin with breaking news from the occupied West Bank, where Israeli forces have killed 3 Palestinians and injured more than 10 others during an overnight operation in the city of Jenin. Now, the Israeli army has hit Jenin with at least 10 airstrikes. A convoy of Israeli armoured vehicles has also been spotted moving towards the city's vast refugee camp. 2 weeks ago, Jenin was the site of the largest Israeli raid in recent years. Separately, a 4th Palestinian was shot and killed near Ramallah. Let's go straight over to Nida Ibrahim, our correspondent in Ramallah, and just bring us up to speed, Nida, on the flashpoints that we really need to be focusing on right now as the death toll rises and the injured now tallies into double figures.
Now we're talking about a current strike that just took place in the Jenin refugee camp. According to local sources, we're talking about more than 10 airstrikes since the beginning of the Israeli invasion, let's call it, or the Israeli escalation that took place a little bit after midnight. Now, what happened is that the Israeli forces started shooting from choppers, missiles towards Palestinian targets, leading to the killing of 3 Palestinians. Now, as you say, the number of those who were injured, we're talking about 19 who were wounded, some of them in critical conditions. The ambulances weren't able to get to the scene of where the injured people were because of the Israeli forces preventing them, shooting at them. Even some of those who were injured were medics. So we are expecting the numbers of those Palestinians to potentially rise. There is a lot of tension now in the refugee camp as the Israeli forces are making their way inside the refugee camp. The bulldozers are going inside. Now, we know for a while now that the Israeli forces have been targeting the Jenin refugee camp. They say that it's a cradle for Palestinian resistance. It has so many people who are working side by side together to attack Israeli targets. Just this year alone, the Israeli army says that more than 50 attacks against Israeli targets came from the Jenin area itself. So it remains a very tense situation in Jenin right now.
Thank you for the update, Nida Ibrahim, there for us in Ramallah. Let's cross over to Rami Khouri, who's co-director of the Global Engagement at American University of Beirut, joins us now from Cambridge in Massachusetts. Mr. Khouri, always good to have you on the programme for your insight. The focus of the Israeli military attack seems to be Jenin. It has been over the past few weeks. Why?
Well, Sahel, Jenin has emerged recently in the last year or so as the center of a series of local resistance groups that have formed and emerged spontaneously, not linked to any of the traditional Palestinian political groups like Fatah or Popular Front or any of those, because the Israelis have perpetuated such a vicious occupation, and the Palestinian Authority has been so totally incompetent in providing either leadership or assistance to the Palestinians or protection, that finally young people, groups of young men have taken it upon themselves to create small armed group, very locally grounded, and there's several of these now in Tulkarm and Nablus and other places. And Jenin is the most dramatic example of this. And the other thing to keep in mind is Jenin has been attacked several times before, going back to 2002 and a few years ago and earlier this year. And Jenin constantly is attacked by Israelis now with warplanes and drones and missiles, and they've used almost every arsenal, every weapon in their arsenal, and the resistance simply keeps expanding. And it is the lesson of an occupied, subjugated people that resists, a lesson that the Jewish people throughout history really taught the world in so many cases of terrible, terrible subjugation and pogroms that the Jews were subjected to, and mostly in white Christian Europe. And they fought back, and they fought back, and they kept fighting back. And any occupied people is going to fight back. And the Israelis don't seem to understand that massive military force simply breeds more sophisticated resistance. And just one last point here, the wider picture is the Israelis have been doing this for about 45 and 50 years. They did it in Lebanon. I remember living in Beirut when the Israelis would attack the airport or attack the Palestinian camps, and they came up to lay siege to Beirut. And they kept saying this is going to put an end to Palestinian terror. And of course, it didn't. It didn't put an end to any kind of resistance. It only intensified it. Then they tried it in the West Bank. They tried it in Gaza. And they're still doing it in Gaza. And it doesn't work. The Israelis are very smart people, but they're very stupid when it comes to understanding the consequences of their own occupation, subjugation, racism, and apartheid.
And of course, you focus very much there in this conversation just now on that military might. Yet the added factor to this and what's emboldened the Israelis are the settlers. It has been a very focused attack by settlers over the past few months, and therefore the retaliation and the resistance by the Palestinians has also been as strong.
Of course, the Palestinian fighters are attacking settlers who are legitimate targets in international law. They're an occupying force. They're there illegally. The settlers are criminals by international law. Anybody who breaks the law is a criminal. Israeli settlers, including government officials and others, are criminals, and the Palestinians push back and fight them and kill them if they can, because this is a war. This is not a picnic where suddenly somebody throws food at somebody else. This is a war that's been going on since the 1930s. The other point about the settlers is the UN statistics that were released today show that there have been 570 attacks, 570 attacks by settlers against Palestinians in this year alone. That's an average of 3 every day. They don't all get reported in the media, and almost very few of them get reported in the Western media. So the settlers are simply the latest manifestation of an armed, excessive, cruel armed movement that Zionism has inflicted on Palestine starting in the 1930s. And it just keeps getting more intense, but keeps failing to achieve its main objective of trying to pacify the Palestinians. And there's now 12 million Palestinians. They're not going anywhere. And they're going to keep fighting back. So this is a terrible tragedy for everybody concerned. And the latest twist of this, the Israeli army today was sending SMS text messages to the cell phones of Palestinian families inside Jenin, telling them to be informers, to say, if you know of any terrorist or wanted person, please call this Israeli number, call the army. It's incredible, the gross barbaric cruelty of the Israeli military machine, combined with its failure to stop Palestinian resistance, is really quite astounding. And this will go on and on and on until one day the Israelis accept the Palestinian and the Arab offer, which is still on the table, to live peacefully side by side with a Palestinian state, an Israeli Jewish state, majority Israeli with many Arabs in it, and equal rights for all. Until that day comes, we're going to see this kind of cycle of violence and counter-violence continuing. And in the meanwhile, the Palestinian Arab side, if you look at Hamas, you look at Hezbollah, you look at the Houthis in Yemen, they're getting more sophisticated.
They are. It's such a complicated web of conflict that we continue to monitor. Thank you very much yet again, Rami Khouri, for your insight. Thanks for joining us from Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you.